This week's theme was paper, and the idea I had for this was to make a turn-based combat system that the enemy would be based around different origami animals. The way that combat works is that the player will be able to attack, and then it'll be the enemy's turn, and they'll attack the player. The player also has the option to heal if they want to gain some more health to last longer in the battle. There's a script called the battle system where it controls all the player and enemy stats that are used through the game, like health and how much attack damage they'll do. The art for the game, especially the enemies, are supposed to represent different origami figures, and I thought I'll stylize them to make them more interesting to look at. The dialogue at the bottom represents what the player is doing at the time, like the player has won the battle, the player has lost the battle, or if it's their turn or not. Problems I encountered when making the game was things like the health bar not representing full health. It has a small black part when the game begins. For the physical paper implement into my idea, I thought about letting people actually make origami and me making little tutorials for them to make, and on that sheet will be a QR code that can be scanned into the game using a webcam, and it will allow people to battle specific origami figures. And if this was used, then it could be used as a collection system, much like Pokemon is. The QR box, where the QR codes can be scanned, also tells the player the name, the level, the damage, and also some special moves that could be integrated later into the project. The game idea I decided to do for this week's theme of voice was to make a game where the player had to use nothing but voice commands to play the game, and the game itself is a simple maze. The way the player interacts with the game is by using a microphone and using specific voice commands for the game to recognize. These voice commands could be start game, where it will start the game from the main menu, and other things like instructions, which will bring the player to the instructions page, and close game. This will be where it will close the application. As far as controls in the game, there is a simple movement system that will help the player navigate through the level, and this is done by using keywords like forward, right, left, and down. As I was making the game, I started to realise how I could further expand on the control system and how voice commands could be used. And one of these ways was allowing the player to say restart, and it'll restart the level for them if they get stuck on a terrain. Also, there is also a main menu command, so they can automatically get back to the main menu from playing the game. But another toolset I used from Unity was the tile system, which is new to me. It allowed me to learn how to make these tile sets and develop them in a way to be used in a very simple environment. I did come to realize a big problem with voice control, and that is that some words just can't be understood by it very well. An example of this is when I was using up as the command word to go forward for the sprite, and S changed to be forward because I think my own accent started to not help it understand what I wanted it to do. And changing the word helped me resolve that problem. I think I've come to realise that it is important what word you use in voice control. For this week's theme, I decided to do a top-down game where there's only 10 seconds for the player to play the game and to kill as many enemies as they can before the timer runs out. How the game works is that the player is spawned into the level and is able to move around the screen and use a projectile to defeat different enemies. And there will be random spawners around the screen, so enemies can come at random points through the level. There is a kill count on the bottom right, so that the player can keep track of how many kills they get throughout the game. There's also a timer at the top of the screen, so the player can keep track of how they're doing through the level and how much time they have left. Last thing about the game is that there is also health on the player, so if the player takes enough hits by the enemy, they will die and the game will reset. One of the problems that I ran into while testing the game was that the projectiles would bounce off the edges of the screen, and this resulted in, if an enemy spawned underneath that projectile, then the player would automatically get a point. And this would be fixed by having the empty objects around the edges of the screen being able to destroy the projectile that goes to the edge of the screen. One of the elements that I would want to implement in the future would be to add a function where if the player killed an enemy, there would be like a 1 second add-on to the timer, making it more challenging for the player and let them get a higher score in the game.